All right. Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, Kakwadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone that taught us this truth. And salutations to the hopeful elect that's around the four corners of the globe. And the elect begins with the 144,000. Yahweh, who the world ignorantly calls God and Jehovah. BAHASHAM is in the name. YAHAWASHI, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. The Rakakwadash, which is the Holy Spirit. I'm the brother I will with the GM at Chicago camp. Out here in Chicago, come back at you, brothers and sisters at a household of faith of the Hopeful Right Select with another lesson. And Lord, I hope this lesson be edifying through the spirit and power of YAHAWASHI. Once again, I hope this lesson is edifying. I'm just simply entitled to this lesson, everything that the Most High, Yahweh BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI ultimately made good. These devils are ultimately making it into evil, man. For an example, right? If you read Genesis, the first chapter, the Lord, Yahweh, the Most High Yahweh set up YAHAWASHI and, the Elohim, to ultimately what? To create as we, now, to, known to be what? The creation, the sun, the moon, the living creatures that ultimately, that dwell upon the earth, and ultimately what? Esau Edom is trying to ultimately, how can I say it in the back of better words? He's trying to ultimately, make creation in his own image, man. He's ultimately creating artificial wombs for men, for two men to ultimately to have children, man. He's ultimately, like I said, artificial womb. This devil is, recreating our foods that we eat, man. You ever heard, it's a thing out there called GMO foods, man, genetically modified organisms. Our fruit grows without seeds, man. Our food is created in the lab. And this is what this devil is ultimately doing, man. This devil has ultimately, everything he put his hands on, man, is turned ultimately to evil, man. But this is the book of Job 9:24. I'm going to just jump straight into it. It says, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covered the faces of the judges thereof. If not, wherein who is he? Right, the earth is given into the hands of the wicked, man. Hey, these elites, beginning with these elites, the so-called white man, which is the wicked man. The earth is ultimately given to them, man. If you read Daniel 4:17, the Lord giveth what? To the bases of men. It says, if not, wherein who is he? Right, this so-called white man, if he's not doing it, who is it then? And these devils is ultimately what? Using different things to ultimately what? To destroy Yahweh BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI's creation, man. To ultimately to alter into his liking. I mentioned a few things, our food, it's ultimately what? It grows without seeds, man. He creates different things within these different laboratories. Hey, the splicing of DNA, man. I just gave, you brothers and sisters an example how ultimately what? How ultimately Yahweh, set up YAHAWASHI and Elohim to ultimately, to set up creation. And at the end of each day, it said what? That they saw that it was good, man. But ultimately, how wicked Esau Edom is, he's trying to, he's ultimately, every single day he's trying to, put some wickedness out there, man, to ultimately to alter these said things, man. And this man is truly the devil, man. He weaponizes everything that's supposed to be good for us. He ultimately weaponizes it and uses it against us, man. That's why we need, that's why we need salvation, man, from this damn devil. Let's grab this. And Salaki, a little bit under the weather. This is the book of Isaiah 29 and verse 16. It says, surely your turning of things upside down shall be as thing as the potter's clay. For shall the work say of him that made it, he made me not? Or shall the thing framed say of him that framed it, he have no understanding? All right, I read that Job 9:24. The earth is given into the hands of the wicked. And with this devil in power, everything is turned upside down, man. Hey, the relationship between man and woman, man. Ultimately Esau Edom putting the woman over the man. Hey, children is out of order, man. The foods that were are supposed to be nutrients for our body, it makes us sick, man. He weaponizes the air that we breathe. Ultimately when you walk outside, man, you feel like shit. For breathing in all these different chemicals, toxins, things of that nature, man. Hey, not to say that he ultimately takes the wages that we're supposed to get. You don't even get a full paycheck, man. Taxes, he takes taxes out your check, man. So everything that this devil is doing, man, it's ultimately what? It's going against the ways of Yahweh BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI, man. How the Lord ultimately set up things, how it's supposed to be, man. How it's supposed to ultimately what? Live on this earth in a righteous manner. Everything that this devil does, it goes against that said fact, man. Everything, he's clean contrary, man, as the scriptures say. He can't do right. The Lord set him up to ultimately what? To be the adversary, man. To be, to play, the wicked on the earth, But let's continue. That's why First Thessalonians ultimately talks about until he's taken out of the way, man. And this devil needs to be taken out of the way, man, because creation itself is ultimately groaning and mourning, man. Because even in Romans 8 it says what? Creation waited for the manifestation of the sons of God, man. Everything is crying out, man. Even the scriptures, it says they shall wear out the saints of the Most High, man. And we're tired, being under this devil's rule, man. Being constantly oppressed, by the things that's supposed to do us good, man. Because like I said before, Esau, he don't weaponizes everything, man. Everything in this society is ultimately, in this world, is used against us, man. This is the book of Habakkuk 1:4. It says, therefore the law is slack, and judgment doth never go forth. For the wicked does compass about the righteous, therefore wrong judgment proceedeth. Right? Because ultimately what? These devils don't ultimately abide by the law, statutes, and commandments. These devils don't ultimately what? They don't push the law, statutes, and commandments, in the earth, man. They push wickedness. Two men can get married, two women can get married, using that for an example, man. You have disobedient children. You got a lot of these YNs walking around, man. Parents aren't able to discipline their children. So as I read back in Isaiah 29, man, your turning of things upside down shall be a stain unto the potter's clay. And why is that, man? Because the law, statutes, and commandments is not being pushed, in this earth today, man. Because we have an unfit ruler and ultimately what? In the power seat, man. It's Sirach, the 10th chapter, man. But let's continue. Let's actually grab this Sirach, the 39th chapter, because I mentioned it. Because certain things, in this earth supposed to do us good, but since Esau Edom is in power, weaponizing everything, it's ultimately used against us, man. This is the book of Sirach, better known as Ecclesiasticus 39-26. It says, the principal thing for the whole use of man's life are water, fire, iron, and salt, flour of wheat, honey, milk, and the blood of the grape, and oil and clothing. And right now, everything I just mentioned, everything that this Sirach 39-26 mentioned, as it says what? It says the principal things of for the whole use of man's life. It says what? Water, fire, iron, salt, flour, and wheat, honey, and milk. And ultimately what? Hey, it's fluoride in our water that we drink. The water that we ultimately bathe and shower in it got different chemicals and stuff in it, man. Fluoride I just mentioned, man. What it says, wheat, honey, and milk. It's a lot of chemicals found in these different things, man. A lot of these things are genetically modified, man. Because if you look out on the back of these different labels that you buy these different products, for an example, what? Honey, milk, is different chemicals in it. It says in the blood of the grape, and oil and clothing, right? Mixed fabric, man. Ultimately what? The clothes that we ultimately buy, man. Mixed fabric. It causes your skin to break out. And this devil is ultimately what? His blessing is the sword. So he weaponizes things that's supposed to be good for us, man. Verse 27, it says, all these things are for good to the godly, so to the sinners they are turned into evil. Right? These sad things are turned into evil, man. These sad things are making us sick, man. You think you're drinking real fresh water, but you're not. It's fluoride in our water, man. Things that's supposed to do us good is ultimately altered by this damn devil. We try to choose the best of the worst, but even with that, man, hey, everything is tampered with, man. Being under the rule of this damn devil, man. Going back to that Habakkuk 1:4 I read, man, hey, when the law is slack, wrong judgment proceedeth. The law, statutes, commandments is not being upkept in this land, man. So this devil got to go, man. But let's continue. That's the book of First Esdras 4:36. It says, all the earth crieth upon the truth, and the heaven blesseth it. All works shake and tremble at it, and with it is no unrighteous thing. Verse 37 says, wine is wicked, the king is wicked, women are wicked, all the children of men are wicked, and such as all, it's like it says, such are all their wicked works, and there is no truth in them, and their unrighteousness also they shall perish. Right? It says all these said things are wicked. And why is that, man? Because what? Who's in rulership right now, man? Hey, Esau Edom. So everything, that Esau Edom touches, the vibration, everything follows the vibration of the king, man. Ultimately what? If the king is in power based off who he is, man, ultimately what? The people is going to be that also, man. And that's how a society is ultimately going to be ran, man. Ultimately what? If the king is wicked, and this king is wicked, these devils, man, Esau Edom, everything else is going to be wicked, man. Our women, because what? Esau Edom gives, these women what? Freedom, because scripture says, give them not liberty to gad abroad. We have no control over our women, man, because Esau Edom gives them freedom, man, gives them rulership, and authority over the man. It says wine is wicked, the king is wicked, women are wicked, all the children of men are wicked, and such as all their wicked works, and there is no truth in them, and they are unrighteous also they shall perish. And exactly right, man. And let me grab that Sirach 10 to back that up. That's why we desperately need salvation, man. This is the book of Sirach 10:1. It says, a wise judge will instruct his people, and the government of a prudent man is well ordered. And Esau Edom is not a wise judge, man. He's a wicked ruler. It says, as the judge of the people is in himself, so are his officers, and what manner of man the ruler of the city is, such are all they that dwell therein. So you're going to have the top that's wicked. So if the top's wicked, everybody underneath the king is wicked, man, because everybody follows the vibration of the king. That's why so much corruption going on around the world, man. Because what? Starting with these elites, they're covetous, they're wicked, they ultimately let freedom reign upon the earth, man. Hey, starting with these small hats, man. Hey, which makes up these elite banking families, man. All of them are small hats. They control your money, they control your wealth, they control your land, and that's another thing, man. Hey, you think you own your house, you pay off your mortgage and things like that, but you have a thing called property taxes, man. If you don't pay those property taxes, what? Your land goes right back to them, man. Your so-called land. Because here in this society, we truly don't own anything, man. We don't own our children, we don't own our family, we don't own our wives, man. We don't own anything, It says the unwise king destroyeth his people. And that's what this damn devil is doing, man. He's destroying his people, man. It says, but through the prudence of them which are in authority, the city shall be inhabited. It says the power of the earth is in the hand of the Lord, and in due time he will set it over in one that is profitable. Who is one that is profitable, man? YAHAWASHI, man. Because what? This damn devil, man, everywhere he goes, it talks about that. Let me see if I can grab that in Malachi. I'm going to come back to that Sirach 10. Because everywhere this damn devil goes, man, he spreads his deceit, his lies, man. His wickedness. This is the book of Malachi 1:4. It says, whereas Edom said, we are impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down. And they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom the Lord Yahweh have indignation forever. So wherever this devil goes, man, he spreads his wickedness amongst the other nations, man. Hey, just look at Ishmael for an example, man. Ishmael, is known for having their women in order, man. Ultimately covered up and things like that. But when Esau Edom comes with this democracy, man, he ultimately pushes feminism among the women. And just look at, all these women as a whole, man, for an example. All of a sudden, what? They got this whole mindset of being a feminist now, man. This is one of many you know, the wicked tactics that Esau Edom comes with to destroy a nation, man. And who did this happen, to the most, man? Hey, you Israelites, man. You so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, man. You know, we was destroyed by this, man. Our families, you know, our women, you know, our children, you know, the wicked, you know, schemes that Esau Edom pushes upon our people, man. You know? And that's why we need salvation from this devil, man. Because everything this devil touches, it becomes, you know, everything becomes, you know, defiled, man. As I read in that first Esdras 4:37. You know, the wine is wicked, the king is wicked, the children of men is wicked, man. You know? That's why we need, you know, this devil needs to go, man. But let's go back to that Sirach 10. Let me get ready to close it out. Let's jump to verse 8. Sirach 10 and 8 says, because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. And right, the Lord is going to bring in a righteous rulership, man. A world that's governed with the law, statutes, and commandments of YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, man. A world of fairness, man. You know, ultimately what? Governed by the law, statutes, and commandments, man. You know, because in the world that's to come, man, you don't have to worry about your wages being stolen, man. You don't have to worry about, you know, you ultimately what? You know, you eating poison. You breathing in poison. Your woman coming up against you, man. Because these said what? You know, the righteous law, statutes, and commandments of YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI will be instituted, man. You know? And this world will be, you know, run in a righteous way, man. You know? You don't have to worry about, you know, looking over your shoulder to make sure your children is not being, you know, taken advantage of, man. You know, this world promotes that, man. You know, you look at the, you know, you research different things. You see the horrors of the things that you see, the things that this society does to children and things of that nature, man. You know, the hidden things, man. You know, that's why the Lord is going to take this devil out of power, man. Let's get that in Revelations. Close out with that. This is the book of Revelations 11 and 18. It says, the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and at the time of the dead they shall be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. And this earth is destroyed in all manner of ways, man, from the food that we eat to the mindsets, you know, to the way of thinking which goes into the mindsets, man. You know, it's a mass confusion in the land, man. You know, no truth, you know. So this world is, you know, destroyed, you know, this earth is destroyed, you know, through and through, man. You know, the animals are beaching themselves, man. You know, wildlife is ultimately, you know, coming up, you know, dead, man. You know, as I said, you know, I had quoting that Romans 8, man, you know, creation groaneth. They ultimately, you know, waited for the manifestations of the sons of God, man. You know, because everything is dying under the authority of this devil, man. You know? But just something I wanted to get into, man. And in the first part, it says what? It says the nations were angry, man. And why is that, man? Because, hey, Babylon the Great, which is America, is fucking over everybody, man. You know, because what? You know, you doing dealings with this place, Babylon the Great, which is America. It causes your whole, you know, your whole nation to err, man. You know? Because what? You know, hey, this is the headquarters of wickedness, man. But just something I wanted to bring out through the spirit. You know, Lord, I hope this lesson was edifying. I want to end up by giving all praise and glory to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, Makakwadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of the great millstone that taught us this truth. And salutations to the hopeful elect that's around the four corners of the globe. Lord, I hope this lesson was edifying. Till next time, Kwam Yasharallah, Shalom, and a Baba Ball. Until next time, Lord willing.